Hello, my friends. Welcome to another edition of Can You Spare? 2 Minutes with God. Today, our journey takes us to the New Testament. We're looking for Acts chapter 5, verse number 29. Then Peter and the rest of the apostles answered and said, "We ought to obey God rather than men." Why would the disciples make this comment? Well, previously, the chief rulers had put them in prison for teaching about Christ. They were released by an angel, and they began to teach again about Christ. And they were questioned by the ruler, saying, "Did not we tell you not to speak about Christ anymore?" And here's their reply: "We ought to obey God rather than men." It may come to a point where man wants us to do one thing, but God has ordained us to do something else, and that is to preach and to teach about his Son, the Christ. And the disciples were determined that we ought to obey God, we ought to submit to God, to his rule, and not to men. And so they made a decision that day that no matter what, Christ was coming first, and we would teach his word. And that's why we have the apostles saying we ought to obey God rather than men. That's determination. That's being faithful to God.